Okay, well, hello, good day, everyone, depending on where we are in the world. But for us here on the West Coast, good morning. Um, well, welcome to the Global Chamber Los Angeles monthly meetup. I just want to make sure everyone here just fine. Welcome to the Global Chamber LA Advisory Board, Los Angeles Chamber, sorry, monthly meetup. Just for many of you, I see familiar faces. So you've been at our monthly meetup, but the whole goal of the meetup is to bring together the Global Chamber members, as well as others that are not here in Los Angeles, but to see what we're doing, but also just where we can connect and really talk about some of the opportunities that we have that's available or any needs. And then we also use this time to give updates, insights, highlights. We have guest speakers that have visited, and we're getting some good guest speakers for the remainder of the year. Today, I will be sharing some insights. I will be the keynote speaker for today. Sarita Jackson, the chair of the Global Chamber LA Advisory Board. But the whole idea is to stay abreast of what is going on when it comes to global business. And in my case, particularly talking about international trade. But before we get into our talk or the insights for today, I do want to open the floor up for Doug if he had any comments.
Sure. Can you hear me, Sarita?
Yes, just fine.
Very good. I'm actually headed over to meet our board chair, Dr. Sanjeev Kagram, the former dean of Thunderbird School of Global Management. We have 16 members of Global Chamber from India, different companies, and we're taking them through Stanford University with a variety of special guests. And so we're starting in a few minutes. I think, Sarita, we talked about today's session is we're going to finish up a little bit early at 10:45. You've got something you need to go to, and that's what I need to go to at 11 o'clock. So that's why I think 10:45 makes a lot of sense. I really look forward to hearing what you have to say. Clearly, a lot going on in the world of trade with tariffs. It's evolving on a weekly daily basis. It seems to be somewhat more stable than it has been. That's good. And at least we understand the instability a little bit better than we did before. And so looking forward to hearing your perspectives on that. I'd also like to, and I see David Harlow's in the call, the whole world of FTZs is fascinating and amazing, and it's solving a lot of problems. And so hopefully David is available to speak sometime between now and 10:45. I also asked Ayako Asahara to speak and give an update on her work that's largely been with companies in Southern California, and she can share a little bit more. And so looking forward to hearing from all of you, hopefully within the time frame that we have here today. So back to you, Sarita. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for taking us to the next level with the chapter. Really appreciate you very much. I loved our meeting that we did in Torrance as well. Sal Alazani of Redac Gateway Hotel has been a really fun center point for so much activity, primarily by Japanese companies coming in to the United States and Southern California, and he's expanding those services, including the hospitality piece like housing, but also now in translation and visa work and training in a variety of other ways, insurance and a variety of other things. And he's expanding those services beyond just Japanese companies, but to companies, foreign nationals coming in from all over the world. So just wanted to flag that opportunity for people to make you aware. I know some of you were at that event, Elizabeth and Francis and Ayako, you were there as well. And so was Anita. So several of you. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. And now back to you, Sarita. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you for bringing up our in-person social. Yeah, that was very, very exciting to bring together our Global Chamber Los Angeles group. our members and guests, where we were able to meet as a part of our end of summer social, as well as business exchange. And so during that social, we had our speakers talk about the opportunities in India and what is happening. And so for today, I am going to shift to another region. But before I get started with my insights, I just want to ask anyone that's on the call, there is an important date, September 30th. What is happening on September 30th of this year? What's happening? Anybody? No.
Am
Anybody?
I cheating by saying, is it related to AGOA?
Doug. Yes.
Did I cheat? Uh-oh. Be quiet, Brookie. Oh my God.
But thanks for at least bringing us to that. So for September 30th, this year we always have what's on our calendar when it comes to holidays, birthdays, so on and so forth. But September 30th is one of the dates that I have been looking at. And yes, Doug, it is related to AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunities Act. What we are looking at, and I've been getting a lot of calls and actually working with, I'm glad to see U.S. companies that are still taking advantage of trade, doing business with the African continent. So when we talk about AGOA, that stands for the African Growth and Opportunities Act. And on September 30th, it is set to expire.
Yep.
So let's talk about, well, first of all, what is AGOA? We get it that it promotes and facilitates trade between the United States and eligible, I always stress eligible, African countries. AGOA goes as far back as 2000. And that was the whole goal. But it is not a trade agreement. I often hear that a lot, where it is mixed in and thrown in as a trade agreement. It is not a trade agreement. A trade agreement similar to our US, Mexico, Canada agreements, or USMCA, is negotiated between the countries. When it comes to AGOA, this is a trade program, a preferential access trade program. So that's a very important distinction to make. We do not have a trade agreement with African countries except for one. Anybody want to take a guess on that one? What country do you think? And don't look it up, please. No AI.
South Africa?
No artificial intelligence. We're going to use human intelligence. What country do you think that we have a trade agreement? Did I hear an answer there?
I guess South Africa.
That would be my
South
guess.
Africa? Let me put so I can see I'm sorry, who was that said that?
That was David.
David,
Yeah.
okay. South Africa. Okay, let's take one more. South Africa. Anyone else?
Kenya?
Kenya. Okay. Good guesses. Okay, so South Africa and Kenya. Well, it is Morocco.
Oh, is it really? Wow.
Yeah, Morocco. So that's the only country where we have a trade agreement that's negotiated, that's comprehensive. The governments come together, they negotiate what products are going to be under this agreement, services, what are the terms, and then when it comes to products or your goods, the tariff line, so on and so forth, right? So that's what you have with Morocco. But for the countries, the African countries, excluding Northern African countries, you have this preferential access program, AGOA. And that's pretty much what drives our trade. But for David and Elizabeth with South Africa and Kenya, there are some things developing, and I'll talk about that closer to the end. But, so those are good countries to mention, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, when it comes to AGOA, this is a preferential access program. It is one way, meaning that the beneficiaries are the exporters in the eligible, I stress eligible, sub-Saharan African countries. And currently, there are 32 eligible sub-Saharan African countries. Okay, and just quickly on what that eligibility means, without getting into too much details, a lot of that is not just when it comes to economics, a lot of that comes to things such as democratic governance, things of that nature that determines a country's eligibility, human rights, respect for human rights, and things like that. So of the African countries in the sub-Saharan African region, you have 32 that are eligible. And it's the exporters from those countries that can export to the U.S. market their goods. And there are 1,800 products on that list that are eligible to export to the United States. So that's a benefit to them, because now I can export my product if it's on that list and not have to worry about paying duties. Okay, and if there's any questions, need me to clarify anything, please feel free to, I can't see everybody's hands, but just, turn on your mic and say, hey, I have a question or I need you to clarify. Now, those are 1,800 products, but there's another set of products, 5,000 products that were also eligible under the Generalized Systems of Preferences, otherwise known as GSP. So that means that there's a total of 6,800 products from these eligible sub-Saharan African countries under AGOA that could come to the United States. So that's what AGOA is. And the Generalized Systems of Preferences is also a preferential access program that allows for exporters from eligible developing economies to export to the United States. However, the GSP has been expired for several years now and has yet to be reauthorized. So that was beneficial for your economies throughout, your eligible economies throughout Africa. Oh, I see your message, Ruby. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just one of those, I like conversation. So you're just gonna see me. Yeah, so that it's more interactive. But thank you for saying that. Okay, so when it comes to the benefit of AGOA for many of these countries is that now that you don't have the Generalized Systems of Preferences, they still have preferential access to the U.S. market. The exporters of these eligible goods, they still have preferential access to the U.S. market under AGOA. So they can continue on, okay? Then the question becomes, well, what are the results? That's what we need to know. What have we seen? Oh, before I get into the results, what's also important is, okay, so what does this mean for the U.S., for U.S. companies? If it's only one way for the exporters from these eligible sub-Saharan African countries, why is Dr. Jackson talking about this for U.S. businesses? Well, for U.S. companies, if I'm importing, then I will say, well, if I'm importing clothing, for example, or, well, mainly clothing, for example, that's the main one that comes to mind, clothing. Well, if I know that I can import from Kenya or Lesotho a shirt or something that is made, and a lot of times this stuff is made from unique fabric or have its own unique designs. If I can import from the African continent and not have to worry about duty-free, well, that gives that exporter a competitive edge here. And then I, as the U.S. importer, will save, at least when it comes to duties. Now, of course, there's a whole host of other costs, right? But when it just comes to duties, I know I can save in that area. Okay, so that's what you see when it comes to how AGOA works. So for myself as the importer, I would consider importing from an African country if I know that I can import a product and not have to pay duties on that product. And as a result of that, we've seen when it just comes to trade, looking at a period from 2002 to 2022, where exports doubled, more than doubled actually, a little bit, from $24 billion in 2002 to $49.9 billion in 2022. So we see trade has been happening. Now, let's go back to that date of September 30th. Ever since pretty much the reciprocal tariff issue with April 2nd, the announcement of these reciprocal tariffs, up until this month, I have been getting questions, and I'm actually going to address this in my company's newsletter coming up. What do you think is going to happen with AGOA? Do you think that it will, that it will be reauthorized? Well, so far, it's still in limbo. There's not much progress, but I will talk about where it stands, what efforts have been made to reauthorize it, but we really won't know unless something happens, as Doug mentions, with things changing day by day, hour by hour. We won't really know unless something happens between now and September 30th, or just when September 30th comes and goes, and we'll have an idea. But there have been efforts to really push at the congressional level with chambers and industry associations to reauthorize the African Growth and Opportunities Act. One, last year, and I remember this vividly because I was reaching out to one of my colleagues that I knew that's involved in international trade from the legal perspective, but also is involved in lobbying from my days living and working in the Washington, D.C. area. So last year, you had the AGOA Renewal and Improvement Act, which was introduced in Congress at the Senate level. Fortunately, it has not made any progress, but the whole idea was to renew AGOA for another 16 years. Okay, so that's one initiative. Just recently, with the House and Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade, nothing formal, but just a discussion of the subcommittee chairman interested in renewing AGOA, at least according to one public report, but nothing that I've seen, unless someone can correct me on that, that's formal. Also here in the state of California, just a few days ago, you have the California Chamber of Commerce, or Cal Chamber, which is really urging Congress to reauthorize AGOA. And then you have the American Apparel and Footwear Association, AAFA, that's pushing to reauthorize AGOA. So I mentioned that because we can talk about these agreements and all of this, but it's also important to know what is happening behind the scenes to really reauthorize AGOA. Now, what are the implications? I've talked about the results in terms of seeing an increase in trade over a 2-decade period between U.S. companies and your companies based in these eligible sub-Saharan African countries. But one other area that I want to mention for the African countries, that you also saw an increase in economic growth, and I'll provide some specifics on that, jobs, increase in employment, and then the further development of certain industries. So again, this has really fueled trade between the United States and the African continent. So now, if AGOA is not reauthorized, it will have serious implications. One, when it comes, and it's interesting because as I follow, like more so from kind of the policy side, the diplomacy side, should the United States not reauthorize AGOA as it is, and I won't get into too many details. I've had this conversation with some of my colleagues about the ways to improve AGOA so that it's really beneficial in the 21st century. Because even though AGOA took effect in 2000, right? We were at the very beginning, but it still has, my personal take on it, still operates as if we were in the 20th century, but to enhance it for the conditions that we are seeing now. If we do not reauthorize AGOA or come up with a strategy that aligns with the current climate that we see, the competitive climate, the global competitive climate, then for the United States, it opens up a space for other countries
to really leverage the opportunities, the business opportunities on the continent, and not just China. I mean, there's a lot of stories about China taking advantage of some of the opportunities, but this is nothing new. But there are other countries as well. So it creates a space for other countries, and then the United States will miss out, just to put it that way. Also, when it comes to the mining sector, so here in the United States, we've heard about minerals, a policy pertaining to minerals. Well, many of the countries that are AGOA beneficiaries produce a large amount of our rare earth minerals that drive some of our technology, you know, cobalt, as an example, copper. And if we do not reauthorize AGOA, now under AGOA, some of the minerals are at zero duties or have a much lower tariff rate. But in June, what we saw was China, because of these reciprocal tariffs, which really makes AGOA not as effective as it could be. Now I'll talk about that. Say, okay, for 53 African nations, we're going to allow for duty-free exports of different rare earth minerals. Okay. Also, on the reciprocal tariffs, which really challenges AGOA, these reciprocal tariffs going back to April of this year, and that finally took effect in August of this year overall. With many of these reciprocal tariffs that have been placed on countries, then it really makes it difficult to justify using AGOA, because if I am an exporter in this country, let's say Kenya, if I'm an exporter in Kenya and I am used to the duty-free treatment for this particular product, well, now under these reciprocal tariffs, which vary depending on the country, then that makes me less competitive. Okay, Lesotho being one such example, where Lesotho has a 50% tariff rate. Now, Lesotho is a small landlocked country. If you look at a map and you look at South Africa, there's a small landlocked country in there called Lesotho. With Lesotho actually was able to grow its economy and develop its apparel industry because it was able to leverage the provisions within AGOA that pertains to apparel and export to the US duty-free. This year with the reciprocal tariffs, now imagine 50% on a small landlocked country with which we do not have a trade imbalance, 50%. As a result of that, 80% of the orders from the United States came to a halt. 80% of orders, because now it's, well, do I want to pay this tariff on the apparel coming from Lesotho? And that resulted in a job loss of 13,000 this year. So that's the other implication that we're seeing of the impacts on the economies in many of these countries. And that's impacting our business relations, our trade relations, because now you have these reciprocal tariffs as high as 50% for a small country such as Lesotho, you know, an underdeveloped economy or a developing economy, whichever category it falls under, and that you have this 50% tariff rate. So it's having an impact in terms of the businesses, that the US importers, as well as the exporters, which has a ripple effect on the economies and the industries. Now, the next steps, okay, so now we've talked about kind of the landscape, what AGOA is, what the results were, the efforts to reauthorize AGOA, and again, we will see what happens by September 30th, and the implications. Then the question becomes, what are the next steps? Well, the next steps, one, with regard to the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is designed to promote intra-regional trade throughout the continent of Africa, and has been considered, you know, going to serve as an engine of growth for many of the countries that is one way. Now that it's still developing to see exactly what's going to happen, but that is something for the African countries to leverage to promote trade, at least on the continent itself, as well as I mentioned earlier, really considering, what's going to happen in terms of our trade with our neighbors and with different countries around the world. That's one. Number two, when I mentioned earlier about Kenya and South Africa, well, those two countries, the presidents have come to the United States and their delegations have pushed for trade talks to negotiate something with the United States. Just recently, we had the president of South Africa come, then also Kenya. Kenya is reviving its trade talks with the United States. The United States and Kenya did start trade talks, a bilateral trade negotiation, which would have been a trade agreement that I talked about, where the countries come together, they negotiate, and then it includes a lot of different products and services. Under the first administration, under President Trump, unfortunately, the talks stalled, but they still came up with a strategic trade and investment partnership, so a trade framework, and now we are revisiting this idea of a trade agreement, and so we'll see what happens with that. The next step is the other part that I promote when it comes to U.S. Africa trade is for businesses to still be engaged. And like I said, this year, I've been really happy working with companies that are doing business on the African continent. And they're taking advantage of other areas, not just the AGOA, but when it comes to the services sector, because many of your economies, many of the countries are driven, their GDP is mainly driven by services. So there are US companies that are taking advantage of the services sector, the digital economy. And then just finally, with the work that my firm, GRIT, the Global Research Institute of International Trade, is doing, is working with these US companies on leveraging the opportunities, regardless of what is happening with AGOA, where the US companies, are also exporting their services in the areas of agricultural equipment, IT services, products for vehicles, vehicular safety, those types of things, and doing the analysis on how they can leverage what is happening in the current trade environment as it pertains to the African continent and other parts around the world, but for the African continent, how they can leverage that and still move forward and promote and facilitate trade between the United States and the African continent. Thank you very much. And so those are my insights when it comes to AGOA. So keep September 30th on your calendar, and we will see what happens by September 30th when it comes to the African Growth and Opportunities Act.
Sarita, do we have any?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, just quick question. Do we have any input as to where this status stands? Because, with the expiration, any talk of renewal, any feedback at all?
Yeah, just what I mentioned with regard to the efforts to reauthorize, but that's mainly on both sides of the aisle in Congress, but we're still waiting. I don't have anything from the executive branch in terms of where this is going, but the reauthorization does happen at the congressional level. So beyond that, not much more that's definitive of where this is going.
Okay.
So in follow-up to that question, are there any particular states that are pushing for the renewal? Like, do they do trade? Do they benefit? Do they export to, or do they import from any of the African countries that would make these Congress people champions for pushing for the renewal?
Yeah, there are different states. I would have to go back and look specifically. I have not looked at the state level, but that's a very good question. But mainly it's around the different industries that are really pushing. But I can go back and look because I don't want to throw out something and be off. But yeah, to see kind of these industries and then the states where you see those industries, they're heavy, but that is a good question. So let me look into that to see this at the state level as well.
One question I had, Sarita, was, and again, I don't know enough about it in the weeds like you do and maybe others do, but what's the drawback or the negative coming from Congress or from the White House administration to not renew this? Because I always thought it was a very positive relationship. Obviously, it's not being used enough and it's not being supported enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what causes me to take a pause on trying to understand why it's not being proposed for renewal, because I know the United States has started putting a lot more investment and giving a lot more attention to African countries. The narrative, it's the next new frontier for global trade is Africa. China has been investing a lot into Africa for a long time, not always in the best scenarios either. And so it's definitely something a lot of countries are focused on. So to me, I would think renewing it at the least would be beneficial. And then I did see Bob's comment too, which he makes a good point as well. But yeah, I'm interested what the congressional and administrative reasons for not wanting to renew it are.
Right. And so, and that is a very good question on why we would not renew. I'll just stick with what has been stated publicly. Let's tie this into not just with trade, but let's just think about with the development issues. Okay, so remember the USAID, Agency for International Development, has been cut. We remember that. Okay. Yeah. Under the USAID, you had a program that funded efforts to promote AGOA, to help businesses, your small, mid-sized businesses, to leverage AGOA in the different eligible countries. You also had trade hubs. That's how I worked on this. You had regional trade hubs, okay, that promoted trade and represented the Southern African region, the West African region, East African region. All of this was fueled under USAID. So when USAID was pulled, it was saying that this is not effective. There's fraud, things of that nature. Even though me having worked on these projects, and maybe there's someone else on the call, others that can also attest to this, it did do a lot of great work in terms of tying trade to economic growth and economic development. So I'm just going to stick with that. There are some other reasons that I just would prefer not to say here as to why AGOA and trade with Africa is not being taken as seriously. But the general idea when we look at USAID and the funding, that both trade and investment to really facilitate trade, was that many of the projects are a waste. And I will leave it at that. I hope that answers the question some way. It does. Yeah, it gives you at least some insight. There's more to it.
Yeah.
But just the diplomatic answer.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate it.
Okay, and Bob had the same question. Bob, did that help? Or do you have more on that one?
Is that the diplomatic answer?
Yes.
What's the undiplomatic answer?
Hi, Sarita. Thank you so much for the explanation. I think it's fantastic. I think it's brilliant. I just want to clarify that I'm not against, letting that go lapse. I think it's a fantastic agreement. What I'm just more concerned about is that I hope the potential silver lining is not lost on the constituent countries, for example, because AGOA, like you mentioned, is preferential. It's not necessarily formalized, but in its absence, I hope, it would then spur African countries to negotiate formal agreements, formal trade agreements that can't just be, taken off the table in a sense, formal trade agreements, more formalized rights on this more certain legal frameworks, bilateral and multilateral frameworks that can really benefit the countries in terms of, lessening trade barriers.
Oh, and that was just the comment, correct? From what I heard.
Yeah, it was more like a comment, yeah. So because like I said, I do appreciate what you said about AGOA, but I'm just kind of saying there is a silver line for affected constituents. Now, I'm not in any way in support of letting the agreement lapse, But I'm
Yeah,
just saying that, there might be a silver lining, for the affected constituents in terms of, encouraging the negotiation of more formalized agreements,
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. Okay. I see what you're saying. So that if a goal, regardless of what happens, but where countries can have like these comprehensive trade agreements where they actually negotiate the trade agreement, that it's not all
Absolutely. Yeah.
developed at the
Yeah.
US Congress.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. And Francis, I saw your hand up and then I see Doug. I'll answer your question as well.
Yes, Sarita, from your perspective or your observations, besides China, what other countries are prioritizing their trade activity with Sahara and African countries?
One is Japan. Japan is really seeing many of the opportunities and currently, well, just what has been published is that Japan is looking to engage in trade talks with Kenya, for example. So Japan is another country that is looking at the African continent, starting with Kenya. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Sarita.
And Doug, is there okay, so Doug's question, is there an organized initiative by a particular group of organizations to lobby, right? So any lobbying organizations, correct? I'm understanding that correctly? Organizations that are lobbying the government.
Is there a movement to support it, or is it just piecemeal relative to different organizations sending in their support?
It's really, it's the different organizations. Okay. Different organizations that are lobbying, lobbying organizations. And then, as I mentioned, the chambers or industry associations. However, I can send a link from one of my colleagues where from last year, that's why I knew what was going on last year, that she sent me a link and ways that people can get involved. So I can share that with the group when this recording goes out so that people can get involved. And, and they've already written the letter of why AGOA is really important. And I will share that link so that you can support that way.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my colleagues.
Just from a just a time management standpoint, you need to leave in 5 minutes, and just to make sure Ayako gets time, I have a little bit more time beside.
Can I just take Ruby's question just quickly? Ruby visiting us from Ghana.
Hi, thank you for the floor. Great discussion, Sarita. I just want to add that apart from Kenya, Ghana is seriously in talks with Japan as well. Our president recently visited, and they are looking to do quite a number of projects in Ghana. And I'm just standing by to know what happens after 30th of September. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ruby. Appreciate it. Okay, all right. And then Doug, I'll let you take it over regarding the speakers, and as we wrap up in 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarita. I'd like to next go to Ayako Asahara. Does very important work. Her company, she'll let you know more about. And I love the fact that you work with so many foreign companies coming in, Ayako, to Southern California in the U.S. Could you explain a little bit more?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Do you hear me?
Mhm.
We can.
Hey, I'm Ayako Asahara from Toki Bookkeeping. We are located in Irvine, Orange County, and provide monthly bookkeeping services and payroll for growing businesses with GAAP-compliant financials on the accrual method. And our team is bilingual in English, Japanese, and Spanish, which allows us to work closely with diverse clients. And we often support U.S. subsidiaries of Japanese companies, as well as California companies with less than 40 employees. And in addition to bookkeeping, we also help businesses set up their U.S. subsidiary in California, assisting with registering their business in the state and connecting them with trusted tax accountants and attorneys to make sure their operation starts off smoothly. And here's one example. We work with a U.S. subsidiary of a Japanese public company, and we send their financial report directly to the parent company in Japan and also attend bi-weekly meetings at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is 9 a.m. in Japan, and to share updates and answer questions. So this process has improved communication and made audit and tax returns easier and helped the parent company feel confident in the U.S. Numbers. So if you know someone who would benefit from timely financials and bookkeeping partner who understand cross-border business, I'd like to connect after this meeting. Thank you so much.
Ayako, do you work with foreign companies coming in that are not Japanese? And do you also work with companies here in Southern California that are not foreign?
We have been working Japanese companies only, but we have a bookkeeper who speaks Spanish. So yeah.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have any questions for Ayako?
Yeah, Ayako, nice to meet you. Great to connect. What software do you use for your bookkeeping service?
We use QuickBooks Online.
Okay. And do you use any others, or is it just QuickBooks Online?
Yeah, just QuickBooks Online.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. We'll continue to go, and Sarita, I think I'm because there's 2 or 3 other folks I want to make sure that we get to. We're going to have to go past 45. Do you mind if I go a little bit further?
Yeah, I will have to log off, but you are the host, or Jim's the host, right? So it won't shut down the meeting.
Okay.
And Doug,
Jim?
I actually had a question for Ayako.
Yeah,
So
David, and I wanted to get to you as well. Just a quick update. So good segue. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the question that I had is for companies such as myself, we're licensed customs brokers. And so have you looked into, as a licensed customs broker, you can't outsource services. The services have to take place in the United States. But I know that is applicable to processing entries or conducting customs business. But do you have experience of clients that are conducting customs business but are able to source accounting functions outside the U.S. using your service? That might be something to look into, because I'd be interested in just understanding that more and being able to disseminate that information throughout the brokerage community if that's allowed. I've just never looked into sourcing accounting for customs business outside the U.S.
Yeah, we have bookkeepers working from California and also from Mexico. So and we have access to their client bank information. So I only allow bookkeepers in the United States to access those clients' sensitive information.
Yeah, I'll connect with you offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, any update from you? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, so just to kind of give everyone an update, as tariffs continue to change, I think just this past week alone, there was the Japan announcement on some of the tariffs and how that is finalizing with the trade agreement. So that came out, I believe, on Sunday or Monday. Then there's, maybe one thing that wasn't mentioned earlier is the USMCA is now at its 6-year review. And so now there's comments for changes or recommendations to USMCA that may see changes like we saw 6 years ago in Trump's first administration. So that's something that I think is really important to make sure that relationship between the 3 countries continues and that program continues with, obviously there's always subtle changes. So that's something for everyone to be mindful of, especially on the export side, and making sure those incentives exist. One of the things that's recently come out with Mexico and Canada is that there are more restrictions on what tariffs are still applicable, even when you do qualify for USMCA. So that's still something that's being, people are still trying to get their heads around and understanding what those tariffs are, which ones do apply, which ones are exempt. So definitely something to look closely at. Foreign trade zones and bonded warehouses still seem to be the 2 programs that help companies navigate tariffs the best, but neither program is a one-stop shop or has a great solution that eliminates them. It does eliminate those tariffs when you're exporting out of the country. And so for companies that have that in their business model, which obviously are always trying to promote exports, there are some advantages there. But again, it continues to be a moving target and a complex process of navigating those programs and how they can help companies short-term and long-term. So definitely that continues. I just returned from the annual conference for the National Association of Foreign Trade Zones. So there was a lot of therapy sessions, but also a lot of conversation on, how to continue to grow those programs to support the ever-changing trade policies. Obviously, the IEPA discussion with the Supreme Court is really going to be a big deal, which I think now that the Supreme Court has accepted the case in an expedited version means we'll hear arguments in November and potentially a decision by end of December is what at least is being promoted. So hopefully that does happen sooner the better, to at least create some stability and some understanding of what exists and what will stay or what won't stay, I think is important to the trade. The feedback we get from the trade a lot is not so much that there's a tariff, but the changing of tariffs and the changing of rules, and that customs a lot of times can't keep up with the changes. Neither can software companies, neither can service providers like customs brokers, as well as those importers and exporters. You give us a rule, we're usually really good at following it, but when you keep changing the rules and you keep changing those discussions, it makes it impossible for the entire supply chain to be compliant and to also be resilient. So that's a lot of what we're seeing right now as it continues. I think from the shipping side to mention, as we've also seen with the pause on a lot of these tariffs throughout the summer, companies have over shipped all of their product or most of their products. So we saw really high numbers in July, probably I think record numbers in July, but now we're starting to see a significant decrease. They're anticipating a 15 to 20% decrease in shipping for the rest of the year. The steamship lines and the carriers are seeing this as well. And so it does look like it will balance out, but it's something that I don't think the industry was anticipating, was to see a decrease in shipping going into the fourth quarter. So those are some of the insights we have, or some of the updates that we've seen here recently. But yeah, thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. We're going to continue to go around the room for just a few more minutes, but I'd like to make sure next several of you gave to introduce yourself. Josh Finfrock is one of those because of his transfer pricing expertise, which relates a little bit to what David talked about. Josh, do you have the ability to introduce yourself and say hi?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, Josh Finfrock. I work with Weaver, which is a full service CPA firm, but I am 100% focused in the niche of transfer pricing services. So anybody bringing import or export is dealing with a customs broker and all the customs related issues. Once it's a group that's a multinational controlled group of entities, there is a tax component. So I kind of have that parallel with all the custom stuff on the supply chain from an income tax perspective with transfer pricing. So a lot of the discussions we're having right now is sort of how to make sure the transfer pricing piece is following along with whatever may need to be happening from a customs perspective, right? Because just like David said, I feel like everybody I talk to is still a little bit of deer in the headlights kind of reaction, and it's the lack of certainty that's the biggest problem. I mean, for some of those moments in time where you were looking at such huge tariff rates, maybe that was actually the problem, was a rate so big that you can't do business anymore is obviously a problem, but the uncertainty, I think, is probably the biggest thing. So yeah, just trying to cover all the pieces. So I work with multinationals every day, documenting for IRS and foreign tax authority purposes these same kind of flows to prove out that they're not shifting income artificially. That's the concern on the income tax side, but it's got to play in alignment to an extent, right, with the customs related impacts and legal ramifications there. So we have to reach out and partner with a lot of people. So David's obviously a great resource. I talked with him and was very impressed with his specialization on the foreign trade zone side, and hopefully see some opportunities to put companies on that path. Because I think there's a lot of opportunities to do small things that can help. On my side, I also see a lot of companies talking about unbundling or first sale for export or these kinds of things on the import side to try and take the actual import price from an accounting perspective and have a different declared value to the CBP to hopefully mitigate some of the costs. But those are big processes to really put a lot of good documentation around and make sure you're really qualified and have taken reasonable care on that side. So
Okay.
you need the specialists to do that piece too.
Have you already connected with Ayako?
I have not.
Okay, let's get you connected. It sounds like you do have a unique specialty there that her companies undoubtedly can help. You've probably already connected to Elizabeth, right? Because Elizabeth, you work with a lot of these companies as well that have this need. Anything that you would like to share?
Yesterday I attended the California Investment Forum 2025, was really interesting. We had an international trade panel that addressed, and we actually addressed the foreign trade zones, which I'm going to talk to David about, because there was lack of knowledge and keen interest in how to manage it. And I actually talked to a couple companies yesterday that were concerned because they've actually lost significant a lot of money and incurred a lot of cost with all this, the bouncing up and down of the tariffs. So very insightful, very insightful. And then FYI, upcoming October is manufacturing month. So there should be a lot of promotion of manufacturing, particularly throughout California. Actually, throughout the U.S. This is recognized throughout the U.S.
Sounds good. Is he still here? Dustin, are you still here? I saw you. You might have had to jump out. Okay. I was trying to get to Dustin before he jumped out, but he's a marketing expert. So if you're interested in marketing, Dustin, there's nobody better. And he's helping us put together some events for not just Southern California, but for Global Chamber overall, kind of building off of what Elizabeth and Anita and the marketing committee have put together regarding the Export League. And David was the one that was going to be moderating. Yes. We weren't able to, I think something happened. You had a client meeting that day or something like that. Yeah. So otherwise you would have moderated, but that was a very successful event, and we're looking to build on that, and Dustin's going to help with that. Before we close the room, I'm here in the Oval at Stanford University, and we've got this event that's just about to start over the next 4 hours. So I've got to jump out in a minute, but does anybody have anything else that's burning inside, or that we didn't cover, or that we said wrong, or anything else that you'd like to share?
Actually, we look forward to hearing your input from this India delegation, especially given the challenges right now, or the potential misunderstandings that could be occurring.
It's another tariff problem and another issue, isn't it? So yeah. Just a quick shout out to Mohammed in Turkey covering Iraq. We have a Globinar coming up on Iraq and the opportunities there. So thank you very much, Mohammed, for jumping in today, as you do so many times. You're always there. You're always present. And hey, 80% is showing up. So thank you for showing up. Appreciate it. And Ruby, of course, thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. We'll end the room. I'll keep you guys posted. Just on, I guess, another quick shout out. Bob Inofe, he did mention, I had a question earlier, but he's a global advisor in Toronto, and we're putting together a couple Canada events. One is more real estate oriented in Vancouver, and I'll be part of that on Sunday, October 5th. It's a new announcement by Global Chamber, a deal making initiative with a platform to be able to do commercial real estate deals that Global Chamber is part of. That's October 5th. But the event for Toronto is at Trowbridge, downtown Toronto, coming up in the latter part of October, and Bob's part of the planning for that, or will be part of the planning for that. So thank you, Bob, for your enthusiasm and your knowledge and your involvement. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
bye.
Have a great rest of your day. Cheers.
Have a good day.
Thank you.